All right. So this is just an initial brief, and we're going to have this brief every week. Okay. And each time I'm going to discuss the entire week and the topics that have been discussed in that week. So it's going to be very brief lecture, and a lot is going to depend on you working on the subject matter, doing the readings, watching the videos, and then participation in the discussion. Now, I don't know if you have participated in any of the discussions, but participation in discussion is absolutely essential for success in this class and for you to get a certificate of completion or for you to get a grade or whatever it is that you're looking for here. It's a policy of the university. You have to do your work, otherwise you will not be acknowledged. You have to do all the work. Okay, so you have to participate in the discussion. There are quizzes in some of the chapters. In other chapters, there are quizzes. There are homework assignments in alternative chapters or in all the chapters, and there are discussions. And those discussions are absolutely essential. Okay, so try to participate. Like I said, we're going to be having this briefing every week. I just want to repeat that about the same time at 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, which is going to be 7 p.m. Or 8 p.m. or even 9 p.m. depending on where you are. Okay, this class is being taken by students from all over the world, so it's up to whoever is where to know when to log in. Okay, so having said that, what is this class all about? Now, this class is all about global political economy, global trade and political economy. Okay. Now, essentially, we're bringing global trade and mixing it with political economy. There is just, classes on global political economy, which is totally different from when you mix it with global trade. Essentially, you are focusing on how global trade and political economy come together. So just give me 1 second, okay? Okay, I am back. So we are looking at two things. How does global trade impact political economy, and how do various countries or various regions of the world, how are they impacted by the political economy of trade? Okay. Now, as we're all aware, I mean, trade is the exchange of goods between two participants. Okay, that's what you call trade. And ordinarily, trade gives rise to bargaining. And the whole attempt is for both sides in trade to get the best value for their exchange. All right. And of course, that value for exchange is subjective. You give me 1 chicken and I give you 2 ducks. Is that a fair exchange? Well, that depends on how much I like ducks. You give me 1 chicken and I'm prepared to give you 10 ducks because I just don't like ducks. Okay? Or you give me 1 chicken and I'll give you 1 leg of duck because I value duck a lot. And if you really insist on eating duck, then I'm just going to give you 1 leg of duck. And it's up to you to decide whether 1 leg of duck is going to be good enough for your whole chicken. And, so this is just, a very basic example. And to the extent that both parties do not exactly agree on the relative value of the exchanges, then that's why you have conflict. Now, that is just the source of conflict in trade in a microcosm. You can now extend this to the issue of global trade and political economy. Political economy comes in because there are internal issues within each country, and then of course there are issues between countries. And so the global trade and issues that arise between countries can have their foundation in issues within countries. And so, for example, if you decide to import beef from Argentina into the United States, then the farmers of beef in the United States can say, wait a minute, if once you begin to import beef from Argentina, you're going to have so much beef that the price of beef is going to fall, and we may not be able to compete with Argentinians because their beef is cheaper. And so what are we going to do with ours? What are we going to do with our own beef? And so we, don't approve of you allowing beef to be imported from Argentina. So in that case, you can see now the Americans will then begin to try to develop policies that will limit the importation of beef from Argentina. And Argentinians will say, but wait a minute, why can't we export beef to America? And so you can see that the issues and conflicts between America and Argentina is arising from issues within the United States. And then Argentinians will say, if we cannot export beef to the United States, we do not want to import American cars either. Aha, there goes an internal issue within Argentina. People who make beef want to be employed, and they are told they cannot export the beef because Americans are complaining about it. And so you have an internal issue bringing about a conflict between two nations. So this is what we're going to look at mostly in this course. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to share my screen and go through some PowerPoint slides so we can look at the issues much more elaborately, so that we will talk about what we're going to be dealing with in this class. Okay, so are you able to see my screen?
Yes, please, I can see the screen.
Okay, so all right, so it's big enough for you to see. Okay, so like I said, this class is about global trade and political economy. And so global trade, what is it? Global trade, as I explained earlier, is trade and exchange of goods among nations. So as you can see, the world is getting smaller, and goods that used to take 6 months to transport from one part of the world to the next will now take a few days. And you can even have products that you can get instantly. If you buy a book from England, it would take you a week to fly it. It used to take 2 months for it to get there. Or you can download an electronic copy and get it right away and reassemble. So we are living in a smaller, what they call the global village. So political economy, that is intersection of economics and politics. Okay. I mean, economics is quite a bit of a hard science if you come to think about it. But when you come to think about the fact that economics is about the allocation of resources, allocation of scarce resources, then this is where politics comes into it. Okay, it's easy, for example, to say that supply and demand should determine prices, but the question then becomes how is it that different constituencies are impacted? Okay, how are different constituencies impacted in the process of an economic system? All right. Now the basic issue then we're going to deal with in this class is the tension between the desire for material benefits in terms of a free trade system and what do you call it, political issues that could arise or conflicts of interest that could arise in the process of trade. Now, one thing that we all agree upon is that trade gives rise to efficiency. That we know. Okay. But the issue then becomes, efficiency for whose benefit. Okay. And so one advantage of free trade is efficiency, and of course, it enables also it's good for growth. Okay, it enables growth. It facilitates economic growth for all trading partners. Now, but the disadvantage, again, you ask yourself, disadvantage against who? One disadvantage of trade is that it can lead to dependence. Okay, it can lead to dependence. And that dependence can go either way. Let us, first of all, look at certain realities of existence, okay? Some countries are more powerful than others. Nevertheless, a powerful country can be dependent on a less powerful country, okay? And that takes quite a bit of explanation. Let us take something as simple as coffee that we drink, okay? Coffee is a stimulant, and many people really, I would say, relish, desire that stimulant properties of coffee. And yet, what has happened is that a big country like America cannot produce its own coffee, period, because of climatic requirements for the production of coffee. And so they must import coffee. If you decide, okay, we will not sell coffee to America, Americans will find alternatives, or Americans could find a way to buy the coffee, whether or not the seller wants to sell it. Okay? And that gives rise to trouble. But the point of the matter is that trade can lead to dependence. Okay? Trade can also create losses to key constituencies. An example that I have given earlier about the importation of beef from, say, Argentina. If you try to import beef from Argentina, then the constituencies that produce beef in America could feel threatened, and that alone could be a source of tension between America and Argentina. Okay. Now, there's also a collective action issue. Okay. Now, how do you manage this tension? Okay. So we reach agreement between America and Argentina on how to manage the tension. How to resolve the issue of conflict between American producers and Argentinian producers. The question then becomes, how do you ensure that we honor the agreement on both sides? And those kinds of issues arise, especially when you deal with the organizations that we will bring about, we will talk about during this class. We're going to talk about them. Okay, now, in order to manage the tensions that arise from enforcement of, or from efforts to resolve the conflicts that could arise between nations, over time, countries have come together to develop systems. And the first effort was after World War I, where we had the General Agreement on Tariffs and Trade, which is called GATT. After World War I, after World War II, a new organization was set up, which is called the World Trade Organization, or the WTO. Okay, and the purposes of either was to work towards liberalization of trade, so that we can trade more. Each country will produce what it does, very well, and what it can produce more efficiently than others, which is really good for everybody. And also resolve disputes that could arise in the process of trade liberalization, because again, like I said, enforcement of agreements could become an issue. Okay. And secondly, the post-war WTO works towards non-discrimination and reciprocity, meaning what I give you, you also give me the same thing back. So, cooperation can only be successful if there is reciprocity. And of course, safeguards that will protect everybody, just in the event that what we agree on becomes deleterious to either party. And one of the issues that the WTO and the nations agree on is to work against protectionism. Protectionism is very serious problem. Okay, protectionism such as imposing import duties, imposing quotas, or even prohibiting certain kinds of trade. Okay, that is trade in legitimate goods. Okay. And these are instruments of trade policy. And also there are arguments for protection, which again creates problems of enforcing, or I would say facilitating trade. And this is where the issue of safeguard also comes in. There are sometimes arguments for protection, and there are practical motivations for protection. Okay, there's practical motivation. And one of them is that you don't want to become dependent.
Yeah.
Okay, so now, as I said earlier, okay, as I said earlier,
Prof, it's like we jumped. Prof, it's like we jumped one slide.
Yeah, I know, because
yes, it's like we jumped one slide.
I know we jumped one slide because
okay.
These are issues that I'd already discussed earlier. The objective being to promote liberalism, to resolve disputes that may arise, and also to have safeguards. So I've already talked about those, and I did not want to repeat them. Okay, and again, major developments that attempt to resolve possible conflicts, or to at least facilitate the concept of trade. One of them is globalization and regionalism. Now, I will emphasize regionalism because what has happened is that countries, blocks of countries come together within regions to at least begin the facilitation of trade among themselves, and then maybe to go as a group to work with other regional groups. But facilitation of trade through regionalism is one of the easiest approaches, okay? Because proximate countries, neighboring countries, are able to essentially identify commonalisms, common things among them. For example, a lot of Mexican food we consume in the United States. And so you can see certain common factors between countries. This is why you have organizations as the ECOWAS. This is why you have organizations as the EU or the European Common Market. There's cooperation among Asian countries. There's Latin American countries. There is, what do you call it, Caribbean or CARICOM countries that have regional trade agreements. And so these regional trade agreements are steps towards facilitation of trade. Okay. Now, as a result of trade, what has happened over time, well, also is a shift in balance of power among states. Okay, and so you can see, China being very powerful in the Southeast Asian region, and so they influence trade in those regions much more than, say, the United States. And so over time, you can see that Japan has become an economic powerhouse. So is China an economic powerhouse. And so China becomes a contending factor I would say a contender for influence would say the EU, the European Union. Going back to dependence, you can see, for example, in order to facilitate trade among nations, you have financial arrangements. And so the SWIFT system, which is the system of clearing accounts in trade between nations through the banking system, we all adopted for the most part, the SWIFT system. But you can see as soon as Russia invades Ukraine, what happens? European countries and the Western world immediately ostracized Russia from SWIFT. And Russia had big problems being able to facilitate trade. And so that's an example of dependence. Yeah. That's a disadvantage. Yeah. And so now they are trying to work with the Chinese, who have developed what amounts to a quasi-independent system, but it also illustrates shifting of the balance of power in states. China has become economically powerful, and the yuan, which is the Chinese currency, has also become a very powerful currency. And so you can see what has happened over time. Okay. So, yes. And these challenges be managed? Well, yes, this is what we are going to ask ourselves as we go through this class. So, again, we will discuss money and finance, okay? Balance of payments issues that make it difficult for some countries to participate, because if you have balance of payments deficits, a number of things happen. One is that your currency will become less valuable, goods exported from your country can become very cheap, and then it becomes difficult for you to import from other countries, because what other countries sell become very expensive inside your own country, and that might make it difficult for a country to participate, or would diminish or reduce the standard of living in your own country. Okay, and of course, if you have balance of payments deficits, borrowing in the international market becomes difficult, and that could affect investments, because if you cannot borrow, you may not be able to invest. Okay. All right. So again, one of the developments over time with regard to money and finance is the Bretton Woods system, which established the International Monetary Fund. Okay. And so we're going to talk about the International Monetary Fund, its functions, and the way it operates. Okay. We're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about debt problems. When certain countries incur a lot of debt, how is it affecting the global trading system? Okay, and financial crises have come and again as a result of trade, and they have impacted trade. One of the earliest financial crises came in the 1970s, when the Arab countries had the global crude oil, or you can say oil crisis, and oil prices escalated so badly that developing countries had tremendous difficulty borrowing, and when they borrowed, they were not able to pay. And so it's a huge financial crisis, and you can say a meltdown across the world. A more recent financial crisis just occurred in 2008, and the global financial system, I would say, was rocked tremendously. I wouldn't say collapsed. You can say collapsed. Well, we are all still here, so it did not just collapse completely, but the global financial system went through a rocky period. Okay, so in the process of managing the system, we will talk about exchange rates, we will talk about the international capital markets and the way they work, and international currencies, and what is the relative power of different participants to operate. Now, the other thing that we need to talk about, in order to understand and explain the global political economy, we also have to talk about what I would call attitudes in very simple language, or you can say perspectives. Okay, why do we have this conflict? Now, there are three main perspectives. Okay, one is liberalism, the other is realism, and the third one, we talk about structuralism, but I will emphasize Marxism or historical materialism in understanding why we have this conflict. At least these perspectives will enable us to explain what's going on. And I begin with realism. Realism sometimes is called mercantilism or economic nationalism. Now, realism is based on the concept that in any kind of interaction between two constituencies, the fundamental thing that is going on is that there is a struggle for domination and advantage between two constituencies. You cannot have two essentially equal participants. No, there has to be, that is, cooperation is not going to be achieved. What is going to happen is that at the end of the day, one side will have more benefit than the other one. This is realism, which is to say, the realist simply comes and says, I don't want to share with you. I'm going to just put it in very simple language. I don't want to share with you. I cannot share with you because your gain is my loss and my gain is your loss. This is the only way that things happen, okay? And so in international trade, the realist is nationalistic in the sense that they want to export their goods at a very expensive rate, and they do not want to import from the other side. And so they want to minimize imports unless it's absolutely essential, and they want to maximize exports as much as possible at the highest possible prices. And so the objective is to for the nation that gains advantage to have a high standard of living. And if that means a low standard of living in the other country, well, so be it. Now, liberalism, which is often also called the rational theory, postulates that there can be cooperation, and through cooperation and free trade, that both sides will end up, it will be a win-win situation. So again, let's use simple language. It will be a win-win situation because through trade cooperation, you're going to have both sides benefit. And so you don't have a zero-sum game. Liberalism, or the rational theory of relationship, is such that we all gain through trade, and so domination is not necessarily the outcome. Now, what Marxism, however, tries to do is to recognize realism and say, but what is the cause of economic difficulties? And historical materialist simply says, in any, throughout time, in every society and between societies, there are two classes of people. You have the capitalist class, the exploiters, and then you have the working classes, who are the exploited. And this is the reason that you have conflicts among nations, because you have the exploiters on both sides. Let me provide an example. Now think about the banana republic. Think about the banana producing country or the coffee producing country and the United States. Now, Americans like bananas and Americans like coffee. Now, but they want to drink coffee cheaply and they want to eat bananas cheaply. Now, what happens then is that you have then that the working class in the banana producing and the coffee producing countries are paid very poorly. Okay, they live in small huts, they live in hospitable conditions, they are paid very poorly, and they don't have good medical facilities, and they don't eat a lot of good food. Compare that to Americans who still want to drink their coffee and live in good houses. And so what happens? What happens is that then the capitalists in America will try to exploit the working class in the coffee and banana exporting country. And so they are paid very low. Okay, but now realize that in the banana producing country, there are also capitalists who are prepared to pay their workers very low so as to be able to export the bananas cheaply to Americans to eat. Because in America, it's a luxury. Okay, now,
yes.
So what would then happen in the banana producing country is that the working class will now begin to form unions to say you have to pay us good wages. Now, in realism, according to realistic theory, the Americans could then try to overthrow the government or to destroy the unions in the banana producing country. Because there the working class is asking for good standard of living, which means that the Americans, desiring that they must eat banana, they must drink coffee, they are prepared to destroy the unions and install a puppet government. So, and the realist is simply saying, so be it. We want to eat cheap bananas, we want to drink cheap coffee, and therefore, they will support the government that enables that. So the Marxist historical materialist recognizes this possibility, in fact, not recognize it, but asserts that this is what is going on in the world. And this is why you will have conflict between the banana producing country and America. That is assuming that when you talk about the banana producing country, you also include the laborers who are trying to form a union. And so the solution to this problem, you can talk about IMF all you want, you can talk about World Trade Organization all you want, those structures will not solve the problem. What will solve the problem is to overthrow the capitalist class and have workers control the world all over. This is what they believe, okay? And we're going to go through that in the process of this class, okay? So we talk about, again, I've gone through what these three ideologies are, and these are the details. The liberalism focuses on individuals, households, and they believe in economic harmony, and that interests are reconcilable if through cooperation. And so we can work together, and there is no zero-sum game. I think I've explained that before, and this is why I go through the slides and I focus. I mean, I skip them if I have, or sometimes I skip them. Then realism focuses on states, and which is to say that states must intervene in trade. And in fact, what happens is that states among themselves are in a struggle for domination. And so the states should, the states do work towards the domination by one or a few states, or at least by one state over the others, okay? And so that the nature of economic relationship but for all practical purposes, it's a zero-sum game. There's no need sitting down here and believing that we can cooperate. That there just has to be have to face that reality. And so what do you call it? Historical materialism simply says that there are classes, and those classes are the source of conflict. And it's a class conflict between the capitalists or the exploited and the exploiters. Okay, recognizes that there is a zero-sum game here, and therefore there's no need trying to set up those institutions, and those institutions themselves, in a way, are instruments to perpetuate exploitation. All right. So, why do we care? Let us. We care because maybe we are confident that we can resolve this problem, and so All right. Okay, we've been through that. And so this is just a summary of what we have already discussed. What I want to do now is now to talk about how we link this to the Sustainable Development Goals of the United Nations as a way of trying to resolve some of these conflicts. The United Nations developed a set of goals to try to minimize conflict around the world, and they developed what was called Sustainable Development Goals. Sustainable simply means achieving development without doing damage to the environment, without creating other problems. That, you know, it's like a medicine that creates another disease. Even though it will cure one disease, it will create another one. Okay, it's a set of 17 goals through 2030 to achieve. All right, and there are detailed targets. Okay. Okay, and so the whole idea is that we are in an interdependent world now. We are living in an integrated world, and so one of the goals, and for this class, we're going to focus on 4 of the 17 goals. We're not going to be able to talk about all 17 goals, and they may not be relevant to what we're doing in this class. And one of the goals is to end poverty in all forms everywhere. Okay, to end poverty in all forms everywhere. And that can be achieved through trade. Okay, and to end hunger and achieve food security and promote sustainable agriculture. And what is sustainable agriculture? Sustainable agriculture is such that we can improve agricultural productivity without harming the environment. For example, using fertilizers that eventually will create problems in the soil. And so also produce food that is healthy. You see a lot of food that is produced, you know, they may look big. We can produce big chickens that are different from the chickens that you ate or your mother, your grandmother ate. But those chickens were natural chickens. They simply fed off of the environment, while we have these chickens that are fed with hormones. In as much as they are big and they produce more chicken per period, but when people eat them over time, they may have other injurious outcomes for those who eat them. Okay? And so we're talking about sustainable agriculture. The third goal of the 17 goals that we will address here will be to ensure healthy lives and promote well-being for all ages, which is good healthcare system. But again, healthy lives will include producing food that does not contain hormones that eventually create problems. And promote inclusive and sustainable economic growth, employment, and decent work for all. And inclusiveness here is inclusiveness where everybody participates and gets benefits, regardless of gender, regardless of age, regardless of region of the world, regardless of religion, and what have you. Okay? And then to reduce inequality within and among the nations. So that's very, very important. And so we're going to talk about the role of multinational corporations in all of this effort, and you know, their contributions and their issues also. We have a lot of issues with them. You know, we're going to talk about perspectives from the home countries that have these multinational corporations, perspectives from the host country. Okay, what are the benefits? What are some of the challenges that we face? Okay, so do you have any questions? We have about 5 more minutes.
Yeah, thank you very much, Prof. I think it's very insightful for me.
Okay.
For me, I came from an accounting background,
Okay.
and I was working in the think tank space, so I was doing research for Ghana at the national level.
Okay.
But then since last year, I've been trying to learn more about the World Bank, the IMF, and the WTO. So, for example, since last year, I've been a fellow with the IMF, trying
Okay.
to work with them. This year, from January to May, I took up an internship with the Geneva office of the UN on
Okay.
UNCTAD. So I work related to trade issues. So the course is something that is very key for me, and I'm very happy with the content, and I'm optimistic to learn so much
Okay,
from it.
I really
I'm also
appreciate it.
trying to look at.
I really appreciate it. I also come from an accounting background. To be honest with you, I was born in
Wow, I
Nigeria.
never knew that.
Yes, I was born in Nigeria. I have an OND in accountancy and I have a PS in accountancy also. But also after that, I veered into quantitative and mathematical methods. But I have always been an avid student of human conflict. And so I studied quite a bit of political economy. I have a PhD in economics. I've been doing my specialty in applied statistics and economics, which is econometrics. But I'm still an avid student of political economy and developed process in political economy while I still retain my accounting skills. And I did quite a bit of accounting work in the past, in small scales. But I was just, heading just towards to get a PhD so that I would do some of the things that I enjoy doing. And political economy is one of them. So it's a pleasure having you. And so I look forward to seeing you next week. Next week, but you should be looking at logging in for the 2 p.m. session. All right?
Yes, yes, that's 6 p.m. For Ghana time. So I've checked that out.
Okay, all right.
Yes, please.
We'll talk to you then.
Yes, please. Thank you so much.
Okay, bye.
Bye.